Hey, everybody. I'm Brett Kinsella, and this is the VoiceBot Podcast. We do this every year. I guess this is our fifth or sixth year now. I think this is our sixth that we've done this. No, it can't be. It should be our fifth year that we've done a prediction or a year in review. We'll get a little bit of predictions at the end, but we're going to focus on the year in review. And what I started doing the last couple of years is really having a couple of these because what I found was there's a European perspective, there's a US perspective, and those are very different. And I used to try to put one person from each geography on the panel, but what I decided was it's actually better to sort of break it out a little bit. Now, this is a global industry, and so we're going to talk about everywhere today, but I wanted to bring some of my friends up on the stage who are going to help me out this year. And I have Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald, Dominik Meissner, and Otto Söderlund. So let's start out with just a brief introduction for each of you, and then we'll get right into it, and I'll let people know what the agenda is for today. Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald.
Hey, everybody. I'm Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald. I'm an independent voice consultant helping companies get on board, do lots of projects. I also have a couple initiatives like Project Zilver, Voice for Older Adults, as well as the Dutch Voice Commons, building better technology together in a sovereign, open manner.
Super. Dominik.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here today. So I'm Dominik Meissner, co-founder of 169 Labs. We started remembering like you do, 5 or 6 years ago. We are a company building voice applications, mostly for Alexa and Google Assistant and and custom assistants. And we might have now over 50 voice applications under our belt. And I think I'd like to share some insights from these applications we have done and the journey we have taken in the last few years here.
Thanks a lot, Dominik. Otto.
Hey, so my name is Otto. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Speechly. I'm a tech entrepreneur who's been passionate about AI for a while. Speechly is now 5 years old, and Speechly is a fast, accurate, and simple voice interface API for web, mobile, and e-commerce. So what we do is that we offer product teams and developers with the tools to very easily add voice features as part of their products. So instead of seeing voice as a separate new channel, we actually see it as a complementary feature to be embedded on basically every single website and application.
Got it. Okay, and I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of VoiceBot.ai. Go there to get all the latest data on the market, news, and other information, including great conversations like these. And so this year, it's been a different year. So last year was a different year because of COVID. This year has been different. It's post-COVID, but we're also in a different phase of voice AI development. But there was a lot of news this year, and the news was not driven by Amazon and Google and Apple like it has been in the past. We're going to talk about those companies a little bit, but we're not going to talk about them as much as we have in previous years when they were really dominating the market. So we have a couple topics I know we're going to go through today. We're going to cover a lot of news. The idea here is we want to give you a look back so that we can use that as context for an interesting look ahead. So some of the topics are going to be funding and acquisitions, probably the biggest story of the year this year. Automotive, we're going to talk about custom assistants. A couple of the guests just mentioned custom assistants. So you've got some really great insight on this panel today. We'll talk briefly about devices, maybe more than briefly, but devices in the past were a big part of the conversation. They seem to be much less these days. And we want to talk a little bit about some market data towards the end and general perspective on where we are as a market. So those are the general areas, but this is conversational. Who knows what will happen? I'm sure Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald will come up with all sorts of crazy things to talk about. And that's why we appreciate him, the happy elf here of the voice AI community. Okay, so I said that our first topic will be funding and acquisitions. And I'm going to start with what I believe is the biggest story of the year. And I think it's the biggest story of the year for many reasons, but it's not every day that you have a $20 billion acquisition in your industry. And what we have is we have the old guard of pre-internet, client server days, desktop computing days, Microsoft buying really the original giant of the speech technology business, which became, ultimately evolved into voice AI. And that's Nuance. Nuance is a multi-billion-dollar company, really grew over many years through acquisitions and was really the dominant player in this space before the last decade or so, and really before the last 3 or 4 years. But what you can see based on the valuation, still a huge player. So news today, so we're recording on December 22nd. The EU just approved this as of the 8th of December. It looked like they might not, or they might delay it further, but Microsoft's trying to get this done by the end of the year. They just approved it. Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald, what do you think about Microsoft buying Nuance?
So as a voice fanboy, which I get paid for, I'm really happy about this because, hey, you get recognition, look at the valuation, and Microsoft is actually becoming a good company with good approaches. So maybe this is for the better. But then on the other hand, I kind of remember, for instance, and I don't know if you remember a company called Autonomy in 2011 got bought for almost 12 billion by HP.
Yes,
and that was a total COCK up because of admin. How do you say it? That wasn't a good thing, as in because it wasn't a real acquisition because the company wasn't really what they thought it was. And so on the one hand, I'm like, yay, this is amazing. On the other hand, we have no clue what's going on. And I wonder always what is behind there. I'm not in the game. I don't know the people that are doing it. I have not as much used the software I don't know why they acquired it and I haven't used it as much as I would like to. What I do hear about Nuance, and which is tough, and this reminds me also of like a long time ago, I started out in the publishing industry. And they actually, the large house I was working for had a deal with SAP and getting a special SAP publisher's version. It turned out that they had so much custom work, it was more than the license or something like that. Yes. And this is exactly what I'm hearing now also about large companies looking for the new version of Nuance. So on the one hand, I'm like, yes, this is very good. On the other hand, I'm like, I don't know. There's lots of stuff going on here. I don't know exactly what, but let's not be too easy on it.
Okay, Otto, what do you think this means for the industry?
Well, I see this as a pretty natural evolution in an industry, and I see this as an indication of some kind of a maturation in the industry. So I'm actually looking at this as a very positive signal, signaling that voice is entering a stage where it's becoming somewhat mainstream, even though we all know that we're still pretty much a niche one. But I think this is really good indication, and I believe that there is a good opportunity to leverage Microsoft's enterprise clientele and their enterprise distribution channels into actually accelerating adoption of voice services across enterprises, which will then I believe trickle out for the whole industry and grow the whole industry pie as we're starting to see more big enterprises take voice services into use. We're starting to see more end user consumer applications of voice. We're seeing new ways how people are using voice to be more efficient and use voice enabled services on a daily basis. And that's something that's going to actually trickle down to the whole industry. And I also believe that there is a need always on many industries, tech industries, that there are the big giants that have their solutions that are, like Maarten said, oftentimes the off-the-shelf portion is what it is, and then there's a lot of customization. So I see this also as an opportunity for smaller players and innovative companies entering this space. So I see this as overall as a really good indication for the industry. So thumbs up for this news.
Absolutely. So Dominik, will this matter in 2 or 3 years? I mean, we've got two giants coming together, basically both old school companies in a new school world. Is this something we're going to be talking about 3 or 4 years from now? Or do you think it's just one of those many giant acquisitions that a few years later, nobody remembers?
So yeah, there's a good point. I think in general, money flowing into the market is always a good sign for the market, because there will be at first money for Nuance. And I think, like you said, for the smaller companies, they might get more seed investment and more interest from the bigger companies. So maybe the money will kind of trickle down to the bottom of the industry. And that is why I answering your question, I think this is something that we might see in the next years, that some of this money will go down the road to other companies that will be acquired by mid-sized companies and then going upstream to the big companies. So this might kind of not these both players will with their vision like enhance the market, but in general, or the bottom of the market will grow up from the roots, and this might impact the industry. And we might not be talking about these two players in this acquisition, but in general, this acquisition triggered something and put a spark in industry, and like got funding for some very innovative companies that will be grown out of these, or will be growing out of this acquisition and this initial partnership. And I think this is something that we will see or we will talk about in the future, that other companies will rise from the marketplace here.
You know, one of the things that happened when they made the announcement is they really focused on healthcare. And Nuance, 2.5 years ago at this point, had basically 3 big divisions. They had healthcare, they had automotive, which was spun out 2 years ago this fall into the company that everyone knows today is Cerence. And then they had the contact center. And interestingly enough, originally when I thought they were going to acquire them, I thought they would focus on healthcare, but they would take advantage of the contact center, the customer support thing, which has been exploding the last couple of years. But they didn't talk about it at all. They really focused on healthcare, and it's really part of their strategic play for healthcare, it seems. And another story, the second one on our list, is Suki, which is a custom assistant for physicians. That actually will record their interactions with the patients, and then it'll automatically upload that to the electronic medical record system. And that's really one of the places where Nuance has been dominant so far, is in the clinical setting. So when you think about that, it's interesting because they came up and they also acquired Seikara, Nuance did, which was one of their competitors in that space. But now there's Suki coming up. It seems like these custom assistants from some of the startups still have a shot at this, that people want to have alternatives.
I don't know. I think that's a presumption. I think from my experience here over in Holland and healthcare and voice, the market really is dominated by the people or by the companies that manage the documentation per patient, and that's government controlled. So there's only 5 or 6 that manage that information system. If you want to add voice to that, it's actually pretty easy. You add, and I've had projects with that, where you add a good Nuance module, which actually works really well. The challenge is more the other side, and that is that those the other companies, the document companies, the information system companies, are not ready really to do a good mobile app with a voice integration to the dossier, to have voice input in a specific patient dossier and stuff like that. So I think it's a very complex market. So on one hand, I think Nuance is really well prepared because they have experience in all these international complex acquisition processes they need to go through in the healthcare space. I mean, the US, of course, is famously difficult. We'll multiply that by 1,000 all over the world, and there you go. So you need to be good at that. Looking at specific assistants, I think overall in any voice space, it's very important to build up your models to have specific domain that you are good at. I wonder if that really is a defendable place for the long term, because you need to really own that space and also be able to defend it. And I think it's more about the service, maybe. So a specific assistant for a specific healthcare corner might work, but I wonder for how long, or if there is a business case. And maybe it is like Dominik said, like and Otto earlier, it's like this. Maybe they make room for some specialization, and that's, for instance, possible with the assistants.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have another story here, and I think Otto, you can build on the Nuance and Seikara and the Suki investment, but I'd also like you to comment on SoundHound, actually, because SoundHound, let's pull this in. They said a couple months ago they would go public at $2 billion. They're going to do it as a SPAC. So that means a SPAC is basically you purchase an existing company and then use that as your vehicle to go public, so you don't have to do your IPO and these types of things. It was just over 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, that they got $1 billion valuation through a couple rounds of funding, the most recent one being $100 million. It seemed like maybe they were at the point where they were probably going to need new capital. And they come forward with this. It looks like they'll raise maybe upwards of $200 million in the SPAC if they can maintain that $2 billion valuation. So what do you think about that? Big acquisitions, and also these other types of clever ways to raise money.
Yeah. So first of all, starting with the clever ways of raising money, then going to the kind of like what's happening in this space. So it was bound to happen, a SPAC merger in the voice space, and SoundHound was on the let's say the bigger size, not as big as Nuance, but on the right size for this kind of transaction. So I'm really happy to see this kind of transaction also on our industry. And when we look at the industry overall, you mentioned these dynamics between, the Nuances and their healthcare or vertical focused services, and then these new players like Suki emerging to the market. And I think that there's still, I think that the voice industry reflects similar kinds of trends that many other sectors in the tech industry follow. So there is always room for innovation, for new players focusing on a very specific problem and solving that in a better way. Nuance has been working on this space for a very long time, which is good, but which is also bad, because there's a lot of legacy, there's a lot of baggage, there is a lot of politics, and there's a lot of legacy requirements originating from client that will actually slow them down. So I don't see that as any kind of a surprise that there is a player that is entering with the vertical model, especially now with the custom assistants. There's certain industries where these custom assistants make a lot of sense, and certain industries where they don't make that much sense, having an off-the-shelf custom assistant, Right. For example, the healthcare industry is pretty regulated, so the processes are pretty standard. So it is possible for you to build a industry-specific, off-the-shelf, pretty much out-of-the-box solution to actually solve the end user's problem on that industry. Industries like the quick service restaurant, it's pretty standard how they work, and there's plenty of these kinds of examples where a kind of like industry-specific custom voice assistant make a lot of sense. But then there's a lot of other industries that actually where the processes are very, very different between the different players. Like, for example, the financial services industry, where all of the companies have, at the end of the day, actually pretty different processes, even if you would think that they are pretty similar, the offerings, but they actually are behind the scenes are pretty different. And what we're seeing in that space, again, is then the custom assistants being actually built by these companies, some of them leveraging some of these kind of white label custom assistant platforms, some of them building them from scratch. And I think that is a pretty interesting trend to see in the market, that there are certain verticals where we're seeing these vertical custom assistant players like Suki entering the market and challenging the incumbents like Nuance. And then at the same time, there's other verticals where companies need to resort to platforms that can help them actually customize the experience, like, for example, SoundHound, that allows them to build these custom assistants. And I think that this is quite an interesting trend that we're seeing, and these news that you brought up right here are excellent examples of this trend in action.
Well, let's talk about one other thing that just builds on your idea of use cases. So Verbit just raised $250 million. They reached a $2 billion valuation, actually ahead of SoundHound. They've been in the market just a couple of years now, and they've had a torrential growth and fundraising activity. 6 months ago, they raised $175 million at just over $1 billion valuation. And it just took the balance of the year to get to 250. Now, this is a transcription service. A lot of people don't know transcription is about a $30 billion annual industry, and it has resisted automation for many years. They came in with a business model with speech and voice technology that was application first, not technology first. So I think that's sort of an interesting idea there. When you look at something like Verbit being able to grow that quickly, that fast, what comes to mind? That's for you, Otto.
Yeah, so thanks. I think that this transcription market has been really kind of like waiting to get liftoff and has really exploded now. And again, I think that there is the same pattern here also, where there are the old guard that has been working on this for a long time, and they have a lot of amazing technology, a great platform, and everything that is great. But at the other hand, it's also slowing them down, and innovative players are coming with newer generation of, for example, the core speech recognition technology and novel, really user-centric approaches of how to solve the end-user problem in a better way. So I think that this is another indication of that there is a lot of opportunity still to innovate in our industry with these vertical specific models. So I'm really happy for Verbit, and they're doing a great job for us to grow the industry overall.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like a large chunk from a Nuance, because that was their space, transcription.
Yeah, many years ago, they did that. In fact, they actually sold off the last of their transcription business a little bit earlier this year. So that's it is interesting that that's one of the original areas, but it just wasn't invested in significantly. And Verbit actually has a business model more than a technology. They have good technology, they've invested in it, that type of thing. So that's an important factor. But their business model of actually creating a marketplace of customers, and then they have these, in particular, they've got human transcribers that do finishing work. And so they've invested in the technology to get better and better for that. And they just acquired a new captioning firm. Let's bring you in here, Dominik. What do you think about this? I think I'm happy to have you comment on any of these things, the big acquisitions, the custom assistants, the new financing in the space, or the use cases. What of those topics really stand out to you for this year?
So I think, like we saw before, transcription and speech recognition is one of the topics that's, I think, driving the market at the moment. We have been at a kind of tipping point where, we saw, they had manual people finishing the transcriptions, and I think we are kind of at the tipping point where we came to from let's say 95% to 98%. And maybe 99% is sufficient. So we just need this another percent that everything, or the customers will be sufficiently understood or transcribed by the AI machines. And so I think that's why this is a big market, and that's why these people are working in these industries, and we see the demand from media companies that want to have that are producing a vast amount of material that needs to be transcribed, for instance. So there's a growing market for this and growing demand for this. And I think other companies will jump on, or other industries will jump onto this train as well, because their data will become more valuable by transcribing. They just had the raw data, and now they can transcribe it, have business intelligence running over it, and in the end maybe make better decisions in the future by analyzing their old data. And the other trend that we are seeing is speech text technology that all these companies are evolving around producing natural sounding artificial voices and characters. I think these are the other companies that are growing exponentially at the moment in the market. And I think this is kind of the sum of. We haven't seen an acquisition in these technologies this year, I'd say. Or did I miss something, or at least not a big one here for text to speech?
Yeah,
what is your feeling?
We've seen a lot of investment in text to speech, so that's been actually one of. I could actually list that as one of the big trends, at least from an investment standpoint, over the past year. Not as much speech to text. We saw a lot of speech to text investments last year in 2020 and a little bit late 2019, because that's core technology, obviously. But this year actually has been a really big year for the text to speech and the high quality synthetic voices, because there's a real movement there. I'll just throw a couple other items on the table just to close this out. If we look at drive-through technology, has been in the news a lot, in part because McDonald's bought a company 2 years ago to bring that voice technology for the drive-through in-house, and then they sold it to IBM. So IBM thinks there's a market there. And then there's 2 or 3 different companies in that space that have raised reasonable A rounds over the last year in that to do that. And then, but I think even the bigger story is probably the customer support and how that's being transformed. It started with chatbots coming in to solve that problem that the IVR solutions could not. So mostly for online and these different types of engagements, a little bit for the IVR backend innovation. And a company that comes to mind there is Yellow. They raised 78 million just about 3 months ago. And that was based on just explosive growth in Asia, where they became probably the top customer support solution for messaging on WhatsApp. And then that grew into like all channels. So it like became a true multi-channel solution, and then they entered US and Europe, and the momentum seems to be continuing. And so when I pull all these things together, in particular customer support being so popular this year in terms of investment from true conversational AI companies, it strikes me that what we're seeing is the year of the enterprise. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was completely year of the consumer application. Last year was kind of mixed. There was a lot of enterprise activity, but there was still consumer. People didn't know because we had COVID and it was a transition year anyway. But this year, it just strikes me that most of the top stories are the enterprise. Any thoughts on that, Dominik?
Yeah, absolutely. I can only agree. I think like the whole technology stack has been moving over to IVR technology and call center and improving the conversations people have there. And that's what we have seen as an agency as well. We get more demand on the business to business side, or not like not on technology used more in call centers and business opportunities than the customer or the assistants people have at home from Alexa and Google Home, for instance. And so I see these technologies that we've been working on being used more and more in these support cases, which are not from a first perspective, not the sexiest applications you can build an IVR. But like on the other hand, if you look from a perspective from a company, you can every call that is not being answered by a human person can save you money from the first minute or from the first second of the conversation. And if you get down these rates and in terms of cost saving, you will be on the happy side in the end with the money you're spending.
Maarten,
you have well, here in Holland, so I run the digital marketing agency Voice work group, where lots of corporates take part, like the voice experts or the customer service manager. And I think over 3 of them, large brand names I can't mention, unfortunately, but energy, banking, stuff like that, like large brands, they're all looking for a new, either one large solution, a nuance, or a Genesis type thing, or another, maybe parts of it, but they're seriously investing. And so from an enterprise, or no, maybe from a security or a maturity adoption skill, you see them growing. And whereas 2 years ago, they had to explain that maybe WhatsApp is an opportunity, now that business case is totally proven, and 75% of communication is WhatsApp. And now they're automating and looking what else they can automate, and voice seems to be the next thing. And they know that they have the organization in place because they proved the chat part, and now they're growing that and upping that. So definitely see that development. And I think, yeah, looking back, I mean, for me, always the start of voice is in Paris, Brett. And I think, Dominik, I met you shortly there as well. And yes, that was the start of the assistant hype, the general assistant hype. And indeed, there was a handoff last year. And now I would say, on one hand, we're in the lull of assistants, general assistants, and we're in the well, I wouldn't call it the hype, though, of customer service voice or enterprise voice. But I don't know, I have this visual where what's that group of jet planes that do shows in the US? The arrows, the red arrows, the blue arrows?
The blue.
Whatever. Anyway, you know that. So you know when they fly together and then they jump down and boom, they go all the way.
Yeah,
Blue Angels. This is what's happening. It's just like we started out with general voice assistants, and now boom, we're going through the enterprise in every which way. I think Speechly is a great example. And there's so many freaking use cases that some large one tries to grab, but everybody else is grabbing. And that's happening now through customer service or enterprise, whatever you want to call it.
And maybe to complement on the perspective, Brett, that you mentioned about this year of the enterprise, I think that's a very interesting concept. But it is true that there has been a lot of the discussions in the industry have been revolving around the consumer use cases, and there has been also some disappointment and fatigue by people listening to the same promises over and over year, but then there's very little kind of value, and that's something that our industry has failed to deliver. And luckily, there are still believers, and especially believers in the enterprises. And what we are seeing at Speechly is a lot of companies are actually looking for voice from the perspective of equipping their professional people with tools to be more efficient in their work. And that I think is pretty interesting because, of course, there's been discussions about these doctor's transcription use cases and all of these other kinds of use cases for a long time already, whether it's professionals involved. But now, especially after the digital transformation has already basically digitalized all processes that have a physical dimension to them, and there is always an information system that is optimizing the process. There is a lot of information that needs to be fed from the information process to the real world work, and from the real world work back to the information processes. And this interface between the kind of the information flows that are governing and guiding the real world work is now currently going through a disruption. After digital disruption, it created a lot of burden for people who used to be working with their hands, with their professions that are nowadays needed to work with computers and tiny mobile applications and everything. And it's getting really frustrating, and it's getting also creating a lot of inefficiencies. And companies are now looking for ways to remove these inefficiencies that have been introduced by the introduction of these systems. And this is what I think is a big trend. And we're going to see a lot more of this going towards next year. But the thing is that you don't read about these things in the newspapers or magazines or TechCrunch,
Right.
Don't put on their headlines, that there's an internet application. No, it's not sexy. Plus, it's a trade secret. So
That's right. Well, I would say that what you're talking about in efficiencies, you're talking about voice as an automation tool. And that's one of the themes I think has really come forward this year. I think 3 years ago, we were talking about voice as an engagement type of paradigm, as opposed to an automation tool for the enterprise. And I think if you look at the terms here, you think about enterprise, automation, use cases, and then money. That's what we've talked about so far. That's how it flowed, right? So it was the money has come about because automation for the enterprise and specific use cases have emerged. That wasn't there 3 years ago. It wasn't as much that the technology wasn't there. It was that it hadn't been wrapped up in something that enterprises could just buy. And I think it probably a good time for us to transition to another topic. Dominik, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about automotive and done some work in that space. And this is another area that I think is in a transition. They're looking for new use cases that the consumers really want. I think that's a really important thing. But we've also had a reset of the competitive landscape. I think a couple of years ago, we talked about SoundHound recently, or just a few moments ago. They were really on the ascendance. It seems like that's tapered off. And really what we've had is Cerence has reasserted itself. They had Cerence Drive earlier this year. They've had big wins with Mercedes and Toyota over the year. They've actually won back a couple of contracts or automakers that they'd appeared to have lost to SoundHound, or maybe they're working in conjunction now. It's some of that's unclear. But then we had the emergence of Google Android Auto OS, known as GAS, G-A-A-S. That's different than Android Auto. Google Assistant is part of it, but it's not necessarily. It's really just a development environment. Plus, you have Assistant and Maps that get layered on top of it. They had a big win with Ford. They had a big win last year with Group PSA. It looks like we're seeing a reshuffling of the deck chairs, where it's really Google and Cerence now, which are leading that space. And maybe SoundHound's pushing a little bit in that space, and then Alexa's trying to get a seat at the table. What are your thoughts on that and just the general use case of voice in the car?
Yeah, I think like in the beginning of the year, I do remember correctly, CES kicked off with a lot of automotive and assistant news. Yeah. All the major companies were talking about how their cars and car entertainment systems are equipped with assistants, and you could use the assistant in the car And this was kind of a big news, and that's what we have seen over the past 12 months, I'd say. That's and with conjunction, it's the consolidation that I think the big players, as you said, I can only confirm, are Cerence, Google, and Alexa trying to step into the space at the moment. And they give us, as for agencies and companies, the tools to work on the experiences in car and equipping us with the technology at our hands to kind of deliver these experiences. What I or our company or we are in our perspectives a little bit missing is the whole concept of an assistant. That's kind of this, it's a custom experience that is tailored to my needs and my environment, my schedule and my preferences. And I think this is where we just need more development, that more integrated information at the fingertips of the assistant that's providing me with my personal right experience than just the custom experience where I can ask for an address which is not tailored to my needs. It would be much better if the assistant would know where I'm going from my schedule and would just pop up and say, hello, your drive is ready, let's go. It will take 20 minutes. Would you like to a podcast? Brad Kinsella's on with his 20 minutes podcast, perfect for you for a ride, and everything's done. And I think this is you would like to know. And I think this is something that's like the big companies need to work on. And this is why maybe the consolidation isn't that a bad thing here, because if you have big players that can integrate a lot of over the whole value chain, they have more information in their hands and they can more tailor these custom experiences much better than a vast different players that know just bits and pieces of the information and can't integrate perfectly into each other. And I think this is something why I would say that these big players are good for the industry at the moment.
Yeah. So Maarten, one of the things I've noticed is we've seen a big move towards identifying the applications in the car that are going to be important. Toyota's announcement with Cerence was really all about that. It was about sort of their new search functionality, some of the entertainment options, the tour guide, the knowledge graph they've developed around geographic locations and things like that. And it strikes me that we once again have that theme of use cases, but in this case, it's not, because it's one industry. It's really just a couple players in that, and we're seeing that play out in healthcare to a certain extent, and some of these other segments where you have 2 or 3 companies that really jump to the top, and then they really just focus on that industry and those use cases.
Yeah, I think it's overall, I think the car use case is so interesting because it's the world but smaller, as in you have several players, you have a platform. On one hand, I'm scared that a voice will be treated as a built-in radio, so there's not too much interaction with all the other systems. On the other hand, it is the best example of something smart having to interact with the lights, with everything. And so to me, it's a great opportunity to explore what needs to be done for real, actual interoperability, which I believe is what's holding everything back. Because if I'm at home talking to my Apple device or my Facebook portal, I just got one, and then I walk to my car, and by the way, I don't even drive, I just watch Jeremy Clarkson, so I really have a bad idea about driving. But I do know, I mean, of course, how it works. And so that experience has to be user-driven, or from a customer point of view, user point of view, not even the customer, a user point of view, as in also the people in the back. And that is freaking hard to do. And combine just the transition from the combustion engine to an IT platform, which might be a combustion, might be battery operated or whatever, the Tesla transformation that they're all going through. This is a hard nut to crack. So of course there are several suppliers. I mean, yay Google, for instance, because they're having a tough time, I think, with their assistant, wondering what to do. And so here they have specific. I mean, of course, they use some basic components and repackage that for the car. But I think overall, it's really a matter of developing it right. And so I think just love to look at it as a development. But again, I mean, imagine a consumer product of what is it, an average price, 40,000 euros or $40,000. I mean, that's so much. So how much value is put into any feature? So one thing I am afraid for, and that's anti-interoperability, which is, of course, that people will want to have, or companies will want to have unique features. So you will buy a Toyota because it does that. And then you can't do it on the other one. And it's so good in general for voice. And I think, that's a risk in this play.
Yeah, just on that point too, I was thinking about Cerence too. You're talking about these features. They came out with a two-wheeler solution, so for motorcycles, and this year, and so that's like the perfect example of something that's really tailored, because it can't be exactly the same as what you have in cabin, because you have limited ability to control. You have to be able to concentrate more, and so I thought that was interesting. Otto, I know you had something to say here.
Yeah, I wanted to offer a perspective to this, what's happening in the automotive industry. So first of all, I think that again, consolidation is pretty clear. There are some big technology companies who are competing for people's time spent. People spend quite a lot of time in the car. They're interfacing with different types of medias, and there are huge battles currently waged globally in fighting about people's time. So from that perspective, I don't think it's a surprise that these big tech companies are entering in this automotive space. Some of them with the operating system angle, some of them with the assistant angle, some of them with the hardware angle, and I think that it's very logical and makes a lot of sense. And what has happened this year to me, there's actually it's been kind of reshuffling of the same chips on the table. So it's only been it's been pretty much about fight on the data ownership. So car manufacturers have finally realized that hey, actually the controlling the customer experience, controlling the data is actually pretty valuable. And whoa, there's somebody coming on our turf, and they realized that, and there's new kinds of alliances being forged, and it's going through a lot of kind of like iterations to industry. But if we really look at what has happened from the end user experience perspective, nothing new has happened during the year. So it's only been shifting the same chips around the block. If you still sit on the car today, the voice experiences still suck. And I don't think that there's anybody who can really be a super big fan of the car voice experiences. They're just really crappy, and we still haven't seen a really good example. Tesla hasn't rocked it. The Polestars haven't rocked it. None of these companies have really rocked it yet. And that's what I'm really hoping to see soon, is that we would finally see an automotive voice-enabled experience that wouldn't suck. And how that's going to happen, I don't know.
Like, actually, I have to contest that a little bit, because I think that the Mercedes experience is quite good. So I understand the sentiment there, but I think there are organizations that are doing this right.
So I don't drive Mercedes. I've seen only videos, but and the videos I've seen are just awkward. I feel bad.
It might be a marketing issue.
So I would say what this industry at the moment needs is maybe a little bit more openness to like third-party developers, because all the experiences they are developing at the moment are driven by themselves, and like any third party, they have kind of this walled garden. So other companies and innovative companies, media companies who might have interesting stuff to listen to or to watch while driving, they don't have access to the automotive at the moment. If they would have kind of a marketplace, something like this, where people would have the possibility to place their experiences there, maybe more innovation would be created, and maybe there would be open up an entertainment market for some in-car experiences that haven't been done yet.
Maybe some parallels there to the set-top box market 15 years ago, which was also very much secluded. The cable boxes, they were not. That's also when Web 2.0 came out and APIs, and they're like, no way, we're not going to share anything. And just some big companies created these awful TV interface stuff that nobody uses.
And then what happened? Over the top.
Yeah.
The top streamers just took over because they provided a better value proposition, better use case alignment.
TikTok,
I guess, is over the top in its own way. Yeah. Well, so let's do a transition here. I think we did a good job of talking about automotive. certainly we could talk about that longer, but I really want to get to a topic we've touched on 3 or 4 times already, which is custom assistants. And custom assistants have been something we've been talking about for a while. At VoiceBot and Voice Insider, we started talking about this, I don't know, 3 years ago or something like that, saying that that's really the future. It's going to be a lot of these enterprises, large and small, adopting these things. It's going to be a thousand flowers bloom type of thing, as opposed to these big platforms, which are really just these sort of mass consumer plays for big companies masked as ecosystems. So custom assistants have had a good year. But interestingly enough, I would say the biggest story of the year in custom assistants was Amazon rolled out Alexa Custom Assistant, because this is something that didn't appear to be on their roadmap for anytime new or anytime soon. They've had a couple of announcements. Disney is one of them, which is the more prominent. They've had an automotive announcement and a couple of others, not a lot of announcements so far. But there's this idea that if you have a custom assistant, you need a platform to develop it on. Amazon saying, hey, we already have the ecosystem. We already have a lot of really capable assistant, which is true. Just build on this. And it's kind of like the Google Gas for automotive is the Alexa custom assistant. So you are giving up some of that control, but you're getting in return like a really capable tool set that you can use with your in-house team. And I think that's one of the key things that people have been looking at. So we've had other custom assistants, but I just want to start with this idea of custom assistants. Maybe we'll start with you, Otto. How are you thinking about this idea of custom, and how do you define that space? Because we have this idea of an assistant, which is a general purpose assistant, but that's not necessarily the only way that people can implement voice technologies in an assistive type way.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very good point there. So if you look at many of the custom assistants that has been released this year, so they have been released by companies who actually have already tried something on the kind of like third-party assistant platforms and ecosystems, and for reasons or others, they felt that it's not sufficient for them, and they're still bullish on voice, and they wanted to build something of their own, so they built that. And something that I believe is pretty interesting in those ones, the custom assistants released this year especially, is that while the assistant, the general assistants have always been characterized by of course, because of the platform limitations, by this voice in, voice out type of always a conversation, always like a turn-based dialogue that is a kind of like a decision tree where people need to kind of navigate. So it's kind of like an IVR on steroids that people need to navigate. What's pretty interesting in these latest assistants, by the companies like Spotify, or the Netflix, or even some of the banks that have released these custom assistants, is that the feedback mechanism of these assistants, they are assistants, you speak to them, they have a kind of like their own branding and everything. But it's not always about getting a conversational response and solving the end user's problem on a conversational way. But many of these assistants work so that you actually call them like you would call a third-party assistant, but actually they will either immediately execute the command that you're asking them to do, or they will provide you with some rich information that is also happening on a visual way. So I think that's a pretty interesting perspective, because that's pretty much reflecting how people have voted with their feet and wallets on current assistant skills. For example, if you look at where people use their assistants nowadays, they use them for very, very simple tasks. They just want their stuff done. They want their timers set or their weathers checked or whatever. So they are not looking for their assistants to have, amazing philosophical conversations. They're just looking to get stuff done. It's extremely functional. And we are seeing this same when companies are looking into building assistants, custom assistants. They are really trying to focus on solving their end user's problem in an efficient way. And what I find very interesting is that the solution that they are finding is actually following another paradigm that has been the dominant paradigm in our industry for quite many years. And I think that this is very interesting when it comes to the new custom assistants launched lately.
Maybe Dominik, you could weigh in on the custom assistant space, because I know you've done a lot of work there.
Yeah, so this like we are talking about like the year in review at the moment. So I'm wondering this year, in terms of custom assistance, like I think we all can agree on that custom assistants, there is a future for custom assistants, and they will just flow down into the market from like, if it's not this year, then maybe next year or the year after. So there's no question, I think, in this perspective. But like on the other hand is which companies can afford building a custom assistant. At the moment, it looks like you need a bigger wallet at the moment to build a custom assistant. So there's no room for the smaller sized use cases. So you need a certain group of users for it to distribute. And what I think we need for the custom assistant is that the money you have to invest into a custom assistant will melt down into smaller portions that more companies can invest in custom assistants themselves. So this is something that like we've seen with custom assistants this year. For instance, we mentioned beforehand, like BBC pulled out of the custom assistants. Maybe they was it too heavy for them on their budgets? I don't know. No one knows if it's politics or whatever. But like what we need from a perspective here is that these technologies enable smaller use cases, and you don't need to spend that much money on custom assistants. On the other hand, I think that the use case, like for the BBC, having a custom assistant is still valid, and there will be a revival. I'm pretty sure there will be a revival. Like, let's say my bet is in 3 years, they will just pull out another custom assistant. We'll have it there again.
Let's do an over-under on that. So I think that BBC will bring the Bee back in 2024. What do you?
3 years from now.
You think? So your answer is never, or you can do a year. Otto, will the Bee come back?
I think that it will come back. It will be eventually a standard feature in a way expected by the consumers. It will come back. I think that any organization who has invested so much time, money, and media effort on a project like that and has had to kind of pull it back, there will be some political wounds to be licked, and there will be some time before they can actually resurface that. But it's pretty fast how fast those custom assistant platforms will be developed. So I would actually predict that it would be 2023 when it will be relaunched.
Okay, so I've got 24. You've got 23. Maarten?
Yeah, so I know I've talked to a lot of European public broadcasters, and they want their own assistant. They're so scared of the general ones.
Yes.
And they want to do their own thing because that's basically their MO. They all do locally their own thing. So and BBC was a great example. I think 24, 25, and because they're currently, I have not heard any rumors about the pain, as you say, Otto, very smart. And oh, by the way, I remember the word being dropped on your event, Dominik, that it got canceled. I remember that, and on a sideline also. It was so non-news. It was so interesting. Yet everybody left. We could have seen it coming. So I think overall, 25. Let's call it. I'll do 25. And that's when they and they'll stick with Microsoft because they're smart, Microsoft, so they'll keep their hooks in and make it worth their while. And personally, I believe there is even a market for Microsoft to use whatever they've done already with BBC and roll out with the European Broadcasting Union and the countries that are willing to create local services. And to use this as a little bridge, I think what I see here in Europe, which I find interesting, or mostly in Holland, is there's a little talk about assistance, very little talk. It's all about language technology,
right?
And building up models, and building up models for dialects, building models for specific use cases. And so assistant, I mean, I'm going to send my people, for instance, this podcast or this show, just to explain like what's happening elsewhere, because there's no word on those kind of automated conversations. But another point I'd like to make is what is an assistant? I mean, there is no clear thing. Does it mean that you have to call it by name, and there is some specific presumed use case or several use cases that you can do with it. It's such a meme. It's such a conceptual thing, and I think that's a very interesting. Yeah, why is that?
Okay, so let's play with that question. I think that's a good one. So Dominic, first give us the year you think the beep will come back, and then tell us what is an assistant.
So I will be on the optimistic side, saying 2023 there will be a revival. So hopefully, because I see the use case, the media use cases, like if you said before, the commands use case, start media, play music, perfect use case, supported by all major assistants. Why wouldn't you build a custom one on this perfect use case? So this is just my feeling here. And like on the other one, what an assistant, you said like people talking about speech recognition technology and talking about these technologies, and no one's talking about assistant, because I think like the assistant is the heavy part in all these conversations, because it really takes AI, data, the rights to data, the rights to personal information, to be an assistant. Just to recognize your voice, that's an easy one, and just to like record everything and then have a transcription. But making meaningful conversations out of it and being an assistant really is tailored to your preferences. That's the hard part, and I think that's where we still need a lot of development time to really get this going. Like if you're looking from a Google perspective, which might have a lot of your data at hand, like you're doing a search, your calendar is there, your mail is there, so Google knows a lot about you, and is having a really hard time being an assistant that really knows what you're looking after, and being like having more foresight than just answering a simple question, what's the weather tomorrow? So that's why I think the assistant hasn't been invented yet in a really contrasting way, saying it. We are still looking for the assistant, and especially the voice assistant.
Yeah. Okay, Otto, what is a voice assistant from your perspective?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think
or is that the right terminology? Should we even be talking about using the term assistant? As Dominic said, maybe it's not been invented yet. Maybe we need new terminology.
Yeah, I think that for me, voice assistant is a use case for using voice technology in an assistance use case for using voice technology. So there's plenty of other ways how voice technology can be used, but voice assistant use case has been dominating the mind share of people now, as it's been driven by certain big tech companies who are wanting to build new platforms that they can own there. And from my perspective, voice assistants are an illusion that it will take still quite many years for the technology to be really on the level that we can talk about assistants, because assistant overall provides the end users with the expectation that this is a general purpose assistant that is able to interact with them in a human-like way. And, even with the latest technologies, even what we're going to see in the next couple of years, we will be still hitting the uncanny valley of, AI being able to really kind of like pretend to be an assistant being, let's call it that way. So from that perspective, I mean, I'm really grateful for the big tech companies for really, boosting the awareness of voice technology within the masses by creating this promise of a voice assistant, starting from the Siri launch, that this is this voice assistant that can solve all your problems. It understands natural language understanding, and it just works.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I think that we will not get there in a while. And we will getting there, we will still need to convince the consumers and the masses by building simpler, more domain-specific voice services that are extremely, extremely good in solving those cases really, really well, which then pave the road for then expanding their capabilities. And one day in the future, we might be able to talk about voice assistants, but not today.
So I'm really sorry to destroy the bubble here. Not that voice assistants haven't been invented yet. Maybe we should talk about like voice control is the thing we are, or the era we're living in. Like you wouldn't pick up your remote and saying this is my personal TV assistant. That's just it's the remote. I control my TV with it. And maybe so at the moment we are in the era of voice control. that you can control your smart home and your applications
like it.
and your TV. And
I like it.
It's not the era of voice assistant yet, and this has been, I think, heavily overpromised to end users.
Yeah, and I think
Well, good to hear that.
Dominik, I really also appreciated that a lot, because I think that it's kind of like the technology has tried to do a kind of like a leapfrog, like a jump from generation 1 to generation 3 without passing through generation 2, and that's kind of like, in a way, we're now experiencing the kind of like the effects of that one, and the kind of collateral effects of that one, because we've promised level 3, but we've been not able to deliver that one, and we haven't gone through level 2. And now I think it's time for us as an industry also to do a really good job in nailing the voice control, showing the masses what a really good, useful, valuable, intuitive, and natural way voice is to interface with technology. And when we are able to do that one, then we can kind of take baby steps towards the voice assistants. I really like that.
I think in that sense, classic hype cycle, peak of over expectations. And now, I mean, like my Blue Angel visualization, we're in the lull, and in the lull is when the actual business case is created, when there's lots of consolidation, one buying the other, and where the use case, the function is born, which will lead to mass use in any which way, in an industry that will never go away. So the power of the lull, I think, is where we're at.
The power of the
lull. But I believe it kind of.
I'm still a hype guy.
It's not us. It's not only us as people working in voice space that have these problems, like this assistant technology and this AI promise that a machine is learning everything, and you just feed data, and then you have the perfect experience for the end user, is not there in any other technology as well. If you look at, if it's not in chatbots, I still have to read my email. It's not sorting out or condensing everything in 5 sentences what has been written there.
It's still Eudora.
Why should we promise something that no other industry is capable of at the moment? I think it's kind of the sad truth at the moment.
So let me throw something on the table here, because I think that I like the idea of this voice control. This command and control is something that's really good, but I believe that we're beyond command and control. When Siri first came out, Adam Chyer used to talk about the do engine. And so there's the ability to be able to take in the speech, automated speech recognition, do some processing, identify what the intent is. So, and there's a way to do that where it's really simple. So it's basically keyword spotting was one of the early technologies people used. So they would just find out what it is, and then they would do these simple inputs, simple outputs. But I think the difference that we have now compared to what people were doing with command and control 3 or 4 years ago is that do engine, or that idea of the decision engine in the back end, being able to having access to the NLU, cascading down into a much richer set of potential responses, and then being able to execute more complex workflows is the thing where I think takes it beyond just command and control, because there's an inherent intelligence there that was not there in the past, where it was more like voice as a button push as opposed to something else. I don't know if Otto, if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very good point, because we are well beyond the very simple voice control, and I've heard the term voice automation being used here, but I think that it's something like you say that we are beyond the very simple things. It's very easy for you, and it's been already for a while very easy for you to do simple voice control, but now it's really about creating value by being able to automate things and execute things, and being able to increase efficiency. So it's not only about from voice to action, but it's actually more about from voice to value with speed and quality. And I think that's what we are now experiencing in the current stage. But I think that where we haven't yet succeeded as an industry is really in finding the use cases. We've been preoccupied by trying to build this overarching AI assistant and we have kind of like discarded looking at, where is the value that our technology can be used for. And I think that that's where we need to go back to the basics, working closely with companies, with enterprises, figuring out the value we can do and how we can really improve the end user experiences and solve their problems better. And that's where we will see the next generation of voice technology emerge, paving the road into actually us being able to fulfill the promises that we've made as an industry, which are pretty high.
Absolutely. Well, let's close on just a really quick question here. There was a really significant announcement on the consumer device side. We've really talked almost entirely about enterprise so far. There was a significant announcement this year by Amazon with the Astro Robot. So that was an Alexa-enabled robot for the home, and it made a lot of headlines for about 2 days. And
Stairless home.
What did you say?
Stairless home. And no
oh
stairs.
Yeah, stairless homes. Yeah, of course. But like, it seems like it's almost been forgotten, and that's a day one edition, and so it's not widely available. And we've just seen this. We've seen some interesting innovation on products. I think the more interesting things I'm seeing is the glasses. So Facebook and Ray-Ban just had something to come out. The Ray-Ban stories come out. So we see the wearables maybe sort of more interesting, generating more long-term interest. We've seen really strong integration with smart home, but I sort of feel like we've peaked on the device side, the consumer device side. Thoughts on that, Maarten or Dominik?
I think on the device side, yeah, there's a saturation maybe. I mean, like I said, I just recently at home got the Portal. So now I have Alexa, I have Siri, I have Google Assistant, and Portal to talk to. And Portal I love because of the camera that follows you. It's on my TV. So it's great for WhatsApp video calls, which I do. And yeah, what else is there indeed? What else is there? And my only problem now is that I get confused because the curtains work on one, the WhatsApp works on the other, and if I don't watch out, I try to do a duo call when I want to do a WhatsApp call. So so I think device-wise, so regarding the glasses, I think there's so much going on with the AR market. I mean, if you compare our voice amounts to the AR amounts and VR amounts of investment in the market, it's uncomparable. There's so much more going on there. So yes, of course, there's glasses. I think on the other hand, voice will be part of that, and there's an opportunity there as well. But for the rest, yeah, maybe the wrist voice, sort of, I'm not even wearing mine, experience can be upgraded. But yeah, yay COVID, I'm at home, so I wear a watch. But yeah, so I think I agree. There's not much going on.
Okay, Dominik.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit missing out on multimodal because that's where they're still innovating and new devices coming out for multimodal. And like from our perspective, what we have seen is that there are many use cases that need multimodal that can't be only accomplished by voice. Others that can really benefit from multimodal experiences, and others will be solemnly voice experiences for sure. So I think multimodal will be something that will be evolving over the next years as well. So we will see more devices with screens. And the other one is I clearly also believe in the wearables, that we will have voice technology with devices like my glasses or my earbuds that will be voice enabled, and I carry my voice assistant with me all the time. And like Maarten, you said, you have so many voice assistants at home. I think you're not the perfect use case on the one hand, because you're kind of the curious one, having every new device at his desk and playing around with it. But like on the other hand, what this will tell us for the future is that we at some point will need to consolidate, that you only have one assistant you're talking to. You're not confused about which wake word to use, which account is connected with which device. This is something that needs to be solved in the future. And I'm not sure. Maybe this kind of plateau tells us that Amazon has won the game, maybe because other manufacturers not stepping up into the markets, not coming close to these release cycles. Maybe like for home, the game is over. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't bet here. But like if you look from this perspective, this plateau is telling us that there's one player that's dominating the market at the moment, which I believe is.
Maybe one question I have here is that why is there an assumption that a dedicated device is needed? I think that's the question. Of course, there is a lot of innovation happening in overall kind of gadgets and all of these things and combining ARs and all of those ones. But when it comes to voice, what you really need is a microphone. And this room where I'm now, I think that there's at least 10 microphones here. Already the installed base of microphones is huge. So why do the end users really need separate products, the separate devices for this one? I really don't see a need for this one because you can embed voice services on like your mobile phones, or your desktops, or TVs, on all of the products there. I fully understand why the internet players want to introduce new devices, especially devices that are able to collect a lot of data, especially valuable data from the homes. And I get it, but from the kind of like from the end user perspective, from the innovation perspective, I don't see that as needed. I understand it as an early stage of NASCAR technology. There's a lot of, these moonshots and trying different things, but I think that we're well beyond that one. And now it's time to consolidate and really like use voice where people are already now interfacing with technology and add voice as part of those ones rather than having a separate tuna can on the table for different assistants. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I totally agree. I think this is the case for interoperability. I mean, that will break through the lull and make sure that everybody will use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I can only agree. I can only agree, and I think I said this on every podcast now that we have done together, Brett, and on many other occasions. So everybody who hasn't heard this before, but I can only point this out. I think like in 10 years from now, people will laugh about us that we had these devices sitting on our desk or boards, and we were just turning to them, talking to them, and this was our voice assistant. As you said, there were microphones all over the place, and just they will just be used for being the voice assistant, and they will just say, why did you have this black box on your desk?
We want a portable voice assistant. We want one voice. We should be able to walk into any room, and we should be able to say something, and our assistant, personalized towards us, because we have all these general purpose that are generalized. They're not for us. They're for a person. They're not necessarily for us. They're not really customized. We should be able to walk in anywhere and should be able to the microphone should know who we are and should be able to help us. And I think that's something that, yes, you and I have talked about for a long time. But I will say that the smart speakers, the smart displays were very important. And I think it goes back to whole product strategy that obviously was pioneered by Regis McKenna back in the 70s and really influenced Steve Jobs. This idea that when you bring a new paradigm to market, as Otto was talking about earlier, that you need to provide all the pieces because the existing players don't have an incentive to make it all work together. And the smart speaker was so important because it forced people to think about no screens, just the voice assistant. And it's such a raw experience and so hard to do that it improved everything. And then the smart displays were important because I think the television providers really had no interest in doing that. The computers didn't have much interest in, the PC manufacturers didn't have much interest in doing that because they had other affordances for UI that they wanted. But then when we start seeing these things, Eric Schwartz, who works with me, his thesis for a couple of years has been TVs are basically going to be smart displays. Like why? Like what's the difference? Why should they be different? It should just all come together. Okay.
I have my new Alexa waiting for me, which is I think 12 inches.
Oh, 15.
Yeah.
15. Yeah, it's in Vegas though. So anybody wants to pick it up, please.
Oh.
It's just,
You need someone to send it to you. Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
It's so inconvenient that they do that in inches and they don't convert it to centimeters for you, so you can actually understand how big it is. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We've run long as we normally do when we get together, but this has been fun. So Otto, you can do two things to close out. So one is I want you to make a very brief thing that you're looking forward to in 2022. That could be a prediction, could be something you're looking forward to, and tell people how to learn more about Speechly.
Great. So next year, I hope that finally we're going to see some mainstream services actually roll out voice features, and we're already seeing the kind of the first initial, the Spotifys and the Netflix of these ones. So next year we're going to see that happening in a lot more services. So if this year it was still a kind of like a oddball, a kind of like exception that there is some kind of voice features in the mainstream products that we're using on a daily basis. By the end of next year, my prediction is that in more than half of the products that we use on a daily basis, applications and websites, there will be some kind of voice features implemented there. So that's my bold prediction. More than half. That is my bold prediction because I'm extremely bullish. There's nothing stopping us. If we just focus the effort that we focus on the assistants into actually building something that can create value today, it's easy peasy to get that to half. Very bullish. Great. And where you can learn more about Speechly, so you can go to our website, speechly.com. You can easily register, try Speechly to add voice features into any website or application. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and also myself there. So happy to tell you more about Speechly.
Okay, perfect. Dominik, you're at bat.
So my prediction, my hope / prediction for next year is we will see the first proactive voice experience emerging. So the smart speaker is talking to me, himself, herself, and not me doing a command. So I will for example, I will just jump into my car and the voice assistant will ask me, where do you want to drive? Instead of me getting in the car and saying, hey, open up, hey, Mercedes, drive me to my office. So there will be a proactive voice experience. And this will be, my prediction will be a game changer for the whole experience, because then it's not command and ask anymore. It's more looking toward an assistant who at the right place and time will just ask me a question and I can answer it, or I will give my command and the voice assistant will give me assistance. So this is something that we will see next year, hopefully. It's my prediction, and people agreeing this is good. And the other one, and let's go to the advertisement break. Hopefully next year we will all meet together in person, maybe. And this hopefully will be the next year of All About Voice, our voice conference that we have been doing here in Munich, in Germany. Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald was our guest. We will see Otto and Maarten there as well, I promise. So hopefully we can do this all in person here in Munich this year. And if we can't do it, we will continue doing our virtual sessions. We are thinking of people are being sick, watching TV or watching the screen all day. We are looking into more bit-sized pieces, more innovative stuff that we can do. So there is something in the pipeline. That's something I can promise. And if you want to know more about it and get your tickets, registration is not open yet, but hopefully will be open sometime. Go to allaboutvoice.io and find out what we are doing with our voice conference here in Europe. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to get everything to know what we are doing here.
Yeah, full endorsement from me about All About Voice and the work that Dominik and Tim are doing to bring people together. Munich, we had such a great time. I guess was this 2 years ago now?
2 years ago, yeah.
And we got together. Such a great time. Met so many amazing people. And particularly, I think if you're from the US and you haven't been integrated into the European voice community, I really recommend that particular show because, for example, that was the first time I met Mikhail Stanislawik in person. We had a really great time. Obviously, Carol Steirer was there. Got to see so many people, not just from Germany, but from Israel, from some of the Nordics were there as well. So I definitely recommend people check that out. Okay, Maarten, you'll have a prediction.
Yeah, well, I remember a previous one of mine was that it was going to be boring, right? So yeah.
Oh, that's right. You did say that. Now, it depends on
was that last year or the 2 years
depends
ago?
on how much you care about money, because there were a lot of big acquisitions. So that was exciting for some people who got big exits. But
yeah,
I think that was last January. Your prediction was this will be a boring year.
And I think overall, I mean, nothing much happened with the general assistants, and of course the enterprise picked up. I think if you put the hype cycle framing on the story, yeah, we are on our way to the trough of disillusionment, or what I call the power of the lull.
It's called the trough.
The foundation.
It's the trough. Yeah, trough.
Oh, yeah.
Trough.
Yeah.
Trough.
Thank you.
So this is one of the English is ridiculous. OUGH is pronounced in this one instance as a TH.
This is where I give away I'm actually not a native speaker. It doesn't happen a lot. It's very good, Brett.
Oh, the Dutch cowboy.
And
He's
exactly.
pretty good.
So there's a lot of consolidation. It's happening. It's happening. We're looking for small use cases to make it happen. The big ones aren't happening. And so I think the boring bit is kind of happening. People are walking away. People are doing other things, Brett, I heard. And so I think it's going to continue. And it's going to be, I mean, also combined with COVID, might be a little bit timely here over in Holland. But I think people are still looking for it. And specifically here in Europe, I think the power of the platform question is very big. Privacy, as well as the various language or the lacking of language models, where a general assistant is easy to roll out, you think, because no, it isn't. I mean, it's easier to have a Facebook language file 20 years ago and just update it to I don't know, German, but it's way different to do that for an assistant. And I think the real story the coming year is actually all these initiatives. Like in Europe now, the EU started the European Language Grid, which is a platform where people can add their models and everything else. And you know, if it's going to work or not, I think just the fact that initiative and money is put there to do something for that plethora of languages that compared to the US market we have over here and we have to deal with. I think that's going to be a big story, as well as I think the Stanford Almond Genie platform will see a big promise. So people are going to think like, hey, that's the Firefox, the Mozilla of voice, which they want to be.
Yeah, baby.
I think also.
Okay, no more alsos. We've got to wrap this up. Tell people how to learn.
One more. Open Voice Network.
Okay.
Agent to agent operability. I mean, it's going to be a word that everybody will be using.
John Stein is on the podcast this week, so you guys will be.
Oh, perfect. So he'll do that way better than I do.
How can people sign up for your newsletter, Maarten?
You'll find everything at lens-fitzgerald.com. And what I do, and if you need any services regarding voice, talks, opinions, or access to the market, or shaping communities and initiatives, that's what I do.
Okay, that's great. It's interesting. I only had to cut you off once today, Maarten. A plethora of information. He's a font of wisdom. I've always had so much fun. And you know, we talked about all about voice in Munich. Maarten, we met in Paris. In
we did.
Yeah, that's sort of to me, that was really such a great, it was like a lot of these things kicked off for the community, particularly in Europe. They did a nice job with that. Okay, folks, I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of VoiceBot.ai. You can get your news, data, research, VoiceBot.ai every day. And you can follow me on the Twitter at Brett Kinsella. We tweet regularly. If you want to keep up on what's going on in the industry, you should just follow me at Brett Kinsella or at VoiceBot.ai is another good way to do that. But I actually have a special for everybody. It's the holiday season. I'm in the spirit of giving. You see the little bot below my name. It's Botcoin. So here's what I'm going to do. Botcoin was launched earlier this year. It was a story that I think was pretty interesting for the industry. We think of it as like a community coin. Don't worry, it's a cryptocurrency, but it's really just an affinity token for our community. And a lot of people have done things with this. Voice Lunch is used it a lot. Jovo's used it a lot. We actually have a new game coming out. BotBridge has put together Detective X. You'll be able to use like NFTs and coins, a little play to earn. So really some fun things there. And there's actually some new games. I'm actually going to do a couple contests with these Unity games that someone put up so that people can win. But I just want to give away some Botcoin to people. So what you need to do is go to before December 31st, or actually up through December 31st. You need to do this because I can't have people watching this year from now and try to remember to do this. So all you really need to do is go to voicebot.ai/Discord. If you're already in the Discord, just go to the Discord, right? If you go in there and you post in the, where should we do it? We'll do it in the all the things chat. So the main area. Just go in there and put your Rally ID So that's your Rally username. So if you don't have a Rally username, like you never bought before, just go to rally.io, sign up. It takes like 1 minute. That's all you have to do. You don't have to buy anything or anything like that. Rally. So your Rally username, put it in the All the Things chat and put 2022. And if you do that, I'll send you a bot coin. So that's like free money for everybody. So just go ahead and do that. And I'd be happy to give out some bot coin because I thought it'd be a fun thing to do associated with this. Gentlemen, Maarten Lens-Fitzgerald, Otto Söderlund, and Dominik Meissner, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise today. This has been, I'd have to say, it's been really fun. I've learned a lot, as always.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Big fun.
Pleasure like always.
next
Great
year.
to meet you.
Okay. Yes. See you next year in person, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Do it.
All right, everyone.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.